Welcome to, getting an echo here. Thank you. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council on what is significant for our French residents, Bastille Day. Welcome to the Civic Centre, our temporary meeting location that allows for appropriate social distancing. Welcome to those viewing via live stream, and I remind them that the agenda can be located on the Council's website. Firstly, a reminder that the usual meeting etiquette and protocols apply, in addition to mandated procedural meeting requirements. You'll be able to see the minutes in progress on your individual screens via the Zoom link sent to you today. We will be using show of hands to indicate your desire to withdraw an item, to gain my attention, or to speak. I ask you to raise your hand high so that I can see it for voting as well. Our CEO will support me in identifying the order of speaking and to ensure fairness and equity for all. It will be appreciated by all here and by those viewing from home that you speak clearly and you speak towards the microphone, which is in the central disc in the middle of the room. Only, of course, when asked or required to do so, remembering that your comments and remarks may be heard when you are not officially debating. We got into different kinds of habits when we were on Zoom. Please show appropriate etiquette and respect for each speaker. For your information, the toilets are located in the corridor at the rear towards the Bill Dean Lounge. And in case of a fire or other emergency, you are asked to follow the instructions from council staff. Before we begin, I ask you to turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent. And now please stand for the opening acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land that we meet on is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. And we pray for understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in, or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Thank you. Please be seated. We are now up to item 3, the apologies. I believe there are nil. Identification of conflicts of interest by elected members. Are there any to be declared?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to declare a conflict in the notice of motion. Item 10.2.
Thank you.
Due to my residence.
And it is a C?
It's a no, it could be an
actual conflict. Thank you. Leave of absence, we have none. Confirmation of minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to move that motion, please? Councillor Piggott. Councillor Cornish seconded. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Deputations. We have one deputation, and that is coming in via Zoom, and that is from a Mr. Michael Dello Iacovo. Michael, from Aldana. Michael, I haven't seen you yet, but you have 5 minutes. There will be a warning bell at 4 minutes, giving you time to collect your thoughts and come to a conclusion. And there will be an opportunity for elected members to ask you questions after your 5 minutes. So if you could stay online, that would be good. And people may wish to ask you questions in relation to your deputation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Michael.
I am speaking in support of Councillor Julian Carbone's motion regarding fur sales today. Fur is cruel. Every year, an estimated 50 to 100 million animals suffer worldwide and die as victims of the fur trade. That is up to 3 animals dying every second for the industry's profits. South Australia and federal laws continue to support this cruel industry by allowing animal fur, including that from bears, seals, possums, rabbits, and raccoons, to be imported and sold within our state. 85% of the industry's skins come from animals raised in tiny cages where they're unable to carry out their most basic natural behaviors. The conditions are often so bad that the animals will bite their own tails and gnaw at their own limbs. To avoid damaging the fur, some of the inhumane methods used to kill the animals include anal electrocution, gassing, breaking their necks, or skinning them alive, and I could go on. The number of animals that need to die for one fur coat vary from 6 to 12 for seals and lynxes to sometimes over 100 for squirrels. The iconic brand Akubra, an Australian brand, uses rabbit fur felt to make its products, with 12 rabbits killed to make just one Akubra hat. The company has even admitted to importing rabbit felts from Ukraine and France to help meet demand. Australia has banned the import of dog and cat fur, but investigations have shown that dog and cat fur is often mislabeled as fox, rabbit, or mink fur and imported to Australia for use. This is evidently an issue consumers care about. Data from multiple sources show that the sales of real fur are declining, while the sales of alternative products such as vegan fur are increasing. 95% of Australians surveyed view farm animal welfare with concern. Fur is sometimes promoted as a sustainable alternative to faux fur, but this could not be further from the truth. Animal farming, including fur, is one of the leading contributors to deforestation, greenhouse gas emissions, and biodiversity loss in the world. Local jurisdictions in the UK and the US are moving to ban the sale of fur on land area under their direction, including Berkeley and Los Angeles. Australia is following suit, with the City of Sydney Council being the first council here to make the ethical shift, followed by the Inner West and Canterbury Bankstown councils of Sydney. Councillor Clovel Moore, the Lord Mayor of Sydney Council, said, while stamping out the trade in fur and exotic animal skins requires state and federal government actions and potentially international treaties, local governments in Australia can help by preventing the sale of these products on their land, end quote. This motion is not saying that people cannot wear fur in Burnside Council, as some critics would have you believe. The motion is only arguing that it cannot be sold, displayed, or promoted for commercial purposes at events on council land. It is a small but important step. By supporting this motion, Burnside Council will be taking a stand and making a statement against a cruel practice. It is an important action to show that the council and community do not find animal cruelty acceptable. I hope that Burnside Council will take a stand against animal cruelty today. Burnside Council would be the first council in South Australia to make this ethical shift, and hopefully the first of many. Some might argue that this is not in the council's jurisdiction, but the reality is that Burnside Council already has a plethora of rules for events and activities on council land, and this would add just one more to bring them in line with community expectations on the council's attitude towards animal cruelty. In September last year, Burnside Council declared that a climate emergency exists and advocated for action and collaboration across all tiers of government, recognizing that climate change needs to be considered holistically in the decisions and operations of council. This is commendable, but let's do this for animal protection as well. I personally am not suggesting that people should stop wearing fur they already own, but for anyone who is unsure about it, I would invite you to consider donating it to Snuggle Coats, an Australian-run charity which donates animal furs back to those who need it most, the animals. They accept donations of fur and sheepskin in all forms of clothing which are disassembled and passed on to animal welfare groups to assist with the rehabilitation of animals in their care. This gives a more natural environment for them, aiding with their nursing. This is especially important in the aftermath of this year's bushfires, as there are still animals in rehabilitation who need our help. So again, please consider voting in favour of this important motion to help animals and to align the activities on council land with people's values. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anyone who wishes to ask a question? No one? Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Michael, for your deputation. I just have a question. You ruled off some facts around the number of animals that die basically for fur and leather products. I'm just wondering, My understanding is in Australia there's a significant number of fur and leather products that are byproducts of the meat industry. So I'm just wondering whether you have any information about the percentage of fur or leather products that aren't a byproduct of that industry.
Councillor. So I don't have numbers for that at hand. What I can say is, and I'm happy to provide that later if that's if that'll be helpful. But I can say that as one example, historically, fur from rabbits has often been used, and that has been a byproduct historically of the meat industry, where rabbits are killed for their meat. However, recently in the last few decades, since we introduced a virus into the wild rabbit population, the rabbit meat industry has not been so prevalent. And so that's one of the reasons why the Akubra company now sources their fur from overseas, because they can no longer source it from Australia. So I guess that's just one example. And I'm sorry, I don't have any statistics on hand for that.
All right, there are no further questions. Thank you very much, Michael, for presenting.
Thank you, ma'am.
There are no petitions. Public question time, as you know, is temporarily suspended. You should have received your answers to the questions on notice via email earlier this evening. Motions on notice. I am concerned that in some of our previous meetings, we have spent a great deal of time on motions on notice, which may have had a detrimental impact on debate about council reports. Hence, upon weighing up this concern, I have decided to change the order of the agenda tonight, and I'm moving item 10 until after item 13. I will rely on all of you to be sensible and observant during tonight's debates overall, while keeping uppermost in your minds our roles of service to our community. It is important that debate is based on fairness, equity, and respect for each other as duly elected members of the City of Burnside Council. Questions without notice? Are there any? Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. My preamble is, if I may, the advertiser on Friday, July 10th, stated free compostable bags and food scrap baskets be provided to households under a new scheme by the Campbelltown Council. The council received a $256,000 grant from Green Industry South Australia. It's expected to roll out for the next month. My question is, can Burnside Council access the same or similar grant from Green Industries SA so that we can do the same?
Through the Mayor, I might ask Cam just to give us some insight about. Look, I'll provide, through your worship, I'll provide more information through an information document to all those members. However, we have received a similar level of grant to provide compostable bags, and we already do provide those bags actually to all residents. And the grant received offset the cost of doing so.
Okay, thank you.
Any motions without? Oh, sorry, another question. Councillor Hedgefield. Sorry, I would say that at the beginning that I might miss corners.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Question without notice. Today, Port Adelaide Council are talking about fox control. My question is, what is the City of Burnside doing to control foxes in the City of Burnside?
Through the Mayor, I might put that to Mark.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I'm not aware that the City of Burnside has any issue with foxes. The only incident I can recall recently is where our rangers were called to assist in a fox that was under some distress because it had obviously been baited. So we did assist in that situation. But in general, no, we don't have a specific process related to foxes.
Thank you. Just to follow up to that, it's interesting that historically foxes have always found a very strong location around ports, and you'll find Port Melbourne is very similar in terms of fox population, where they actually have to go in and control them. So I'm not surprised in a way. There are foxes in Burnside, have no doubt about that though. They exist in the hills areas and they can roam as far down as the plains. So, but they have, as Martin, as Mr. Cooper has said, haven't been a problem that has, in fact, we kind of like them because keep the rabbit population. All right, moving on. Reports of officers. Sorry, no, motions about notes. Motions about notes. I haven't received anything in advance, so I'll move on to item 13.1. I'll go through these and ask for, do you want to do the first one first? Because it doesn't require a motion. Right. So 13.1, level update from the CEO about the award.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought it was just opportune just to give a quick update on the situation of the award to Vicky around the chair. The current state of play is that you remember Burnside resolved to appoint the existing chair for the 2-year term. That resolution was mirrored by Norwood Plain and St Peters. However, it was not supported by City of Walkerville. What that effectively means is we have a stalemate position and can't go forward. Walkerville have agreed to re-present that to their council for them to consider amending their position. If that occurs, the existing chair can step back into his role and continue. If that does not occur, we will start a recruitment process to recruit a chair for either water. So as it exists this minute, the current chair's term ended on the 12th of this month. And what will happen in the intervening period is, as per their charter, at each meeting, a chair will be appointed from the existing members. So the business of the Era Water will continue just till we get through the formal appointment of a chair. Can we take any questions on that?
Councillor Cornish, I think, and then Councillor Daly.
Thank you for the update. I've just been noticing that obviously with our regional subsidiaries, it's becoming more and more problematic to get everyone to agree, which is slowing down a lot of processes. And whether or not this is something we might be able to highlight to the Minister, or there might be some legislation changes that it's not all, or charter changes, so it's not all councils have to agree, but it's the majority of councils or constituent councils that have to agree to those changes. I just wondered if you had any thoughts around those sort of processes of governance.
Through Madam Mayor, but it is frustrating when it appears that all councils aren't on the same page and just slowing us down. I think it's worth a conversation. Having said that, when the subsidiary was formed, that was the agreement that was put in place. So to amend that now kind of fundamentally changes the formulation. But I share your concern, particularly.
Councillor Davey, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, my question was along the same lines, Councillor Cornish, that there is that tendency now to, and there's a particular council, I will say, that is chucking grenades, controversial, and who is sending lots of apparent decisions and lots of regional subsidiaries. So what would the process be for us to change that? Would that mean more than a legislative change, or would it mean changing the individual charter?
It's probably it's probably a larger conversation than this evening. A couple of points that immediately come to mind is that when Era Water was formed, the agreement was effectively for a third split of the assets and liabilities associated with that. Now that's probably a fortuitous position given the relative sizes of the councils involved. One worry I would have is if we look to revisit the voting or the authorities as part of that agreement, there may be a temptation to review the percentages that are attributable. So I'll probably proceed with caution around that thought, but it doesn't mean that behind the scenes we can't do more work to perhaps try and assist where some of those concerns lie.
Any further questions? I don't see any other hands up, so we'll now move to 13.2. And thank you, CEO, for the update. 13.2, I'm seeking someone who wishes to withdraw that debate. Councillor Dawes, you wish to withdraw the debate? Selection panel, we have to go ahead with that one anyway. Council representation review, 13.4. No one wishes to, all right, do I have a mover then? Councillor Lemon, seconded Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Carried. 13.5, regional subsidiaries quarterly reviews. Anyone wishes to raise that one? Right, I seek a mover. Councillor Piggott, seconded by Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Carried. Keeping up all right there. 13.6, city development and safety policy review vegetation. No, then I have need to move it. Councillor Hubel, seconded by Councillor Lemon. All those in favour? Carried. Chambers Gully, former rifle range and club rooms. Does anyone wish to withdraw that for discussion? Councillor Hubel, or you're moving, right? Seconded by Councillor Cornish. Those in favour? Carried. Now we'll move to 10.1, animal fur ban. Motions. Sorry, am I missing something? Oh, sorry, got it back. Apologies. Jumping my head. Eastern Health Authority Audit Committee membership. Councillor Wood.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I am going to move the officer's recommendation, and I'm not sure whether we should add to this or not. I have spoken to Councillor Cornish tonight.
Councillor Dawes, can I just remind you to speak towards the microphone? Thank you.
That's the microphone.
Yes.
It's different from yesterday. So my main concern was that the terms of reference for the audit committee for the Eastern Health Authority are different from ours. So we have a maximum of 6 years for the council audit committee. I do understand that Councillor Cornish told me tonight that he's a new member of the audit committee, and they're going to have another new member, and so the existing member has been there for a period of, will be 10 years, I think. So I can understand the reason why they need to have her on the committee. But I'm wondering whether it needs to be added to the agenda. I'm seeking advice here that we ask EHAR to review the terms of reference for the audit committee, or is it, that will be passed on by Councillor Cornish anyway. So if that's
Happy to take that on.
yeah, have to do that. So therefore, I'm going to move the officer's recommendation number 1 and number 2.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Davey. All those in favour? Carried. The selection panel for appointment, page 27. Seek nominations. Raise the hands. Councillor.
I wish to nominate Councillor Piggott.
Councillor Piggott. Do you accept the nomination, Councillor Piggott?
Yes. I'm going to accept the nomination. Yep.
Councillor Hubel.
I'll nominate Councillor Jones.
Councillor Jones, you wish to accept? Are there any further nominations? Two. There are only two. So if there are no further nominations, then we can go ahead and insert both Councillor Piggott and Councillor Jones' name. Do you have a question?
No, I'll move that.
Oh, you'll move it, okay? You'll work with those two names and added into the motion. All right, thank you. Move Councillor Lemon and seconded by Councillor Davey. All right, all those in favour? Carried. Now we'll move to 10.1. Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have sent through on Friday, I sent through a slightly amended motion, which is now on the screen. Sorry, okay. Members, I would like to start tonight by acknowledging that over the past few days, there has been, and I will accept this, there has been considerable pressure from the community with regards to this particular motion. The phone calls, the emails, and the social media has been very intense, and I'd like to thank you all for the time you've all put in. Animal welfare is a personal passion of mine. I'm a member and donor of virtually every animal welfare organisation there is, and studied animal welfare at Monash University many years ago. So believe me when I say that fur and exotic animal skin products are inherently cruel. The people of Australia are naturally against animal cruelty. The people of Burnside are too, of course, against animal cruelty. What this motion achieves to do is send a very clear and loud message that the City of Burnside is too against animal cruelty, but we are also taking practical steps to demonstrate our ethos. Over the past few days, there's been considerable discussion on social media about ethical and unethical fur. But the fact remains that 85% of all fur in this country comes from tiny steel cages in Asia and Eastern Europe, where animals live their miserable, short lives only to be brutally and barbarically killed for their fur. These tiny defenceless animals, with no legal protection whatsoever, are bashed in the head, electrocuted, and their necks snapped to avoid damage to their fur.
What is your under section 29? I do not want to hear all of this description of cruelty. I think that's totally inappropriate in a council meetings. You should agree. You're here. You can make a point. Totally
Can I just ask you to not graphically describe anything that you may have intended to do so? You do, of course, Councillor Davey, have the right to leave the room.
I've already had to do that, Worship. Thank you.
I'm happy to do so, Your Worship, on the proviso that people are aware of what's going on.
Oh, as if we're not.
You know? Well,
let's just keep our comments ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, well, that skipped basically a whole page. The production of exotic animal skins, such as crocodile, is no less barbaric. Again, this is how 85% of fur is made. What this motion seeks to do is to take social responsibility and ban the sale of any fur and exotic animal skin at any event on council land. Let me make this clear. This is to ban the sale of these products. This has nothing to do with leather shoes, the Merrill robe, the wearing of a kubra on Australia Day. This is not a vegan thing. This is not a vegetarian thing. This is about animal welfare. This is about banning the sale of these unethical products at council-run markets. It's our land, it's our market, so socially unacceptable items can be and should be banned. There has been much discussion over whether this is a matter for local government, and I say it is. When it comes to global social issues, every tier of government should be listening to the concerns of its constituents and where possible take practical action. We can take small practical steps in our own backyard. After all, don't we abide by the mantra, think globally, act locally? Shirking from making a small difference, or saying it's too hard, or this is not our job, is a cop-out. It is an absolute cop-out. Not our jurisdiction is political talk for buck passing. And I'm not a buck passer, I'm a doer. I beg you not to look for an excuse, and saying this is not our control is an excuse. All tiers of government need to work together to take action on this important global social issue. The City of Sydney passed more or less the exact same motion. The City of Inner West Sydney and the City of Canterbury and Bankstown all passed more or less the exact same motion. They showed leadership at a local level on animal welfare. We say we are leaders. The word leadership was used when we joined the global movement in declaring a climate emergency 12 months ago. I urge you now to show leadership and make a strong stand against animal cruelty, where Burnside can and will make a difference.
Thank you, Councillor Carbone. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hubble?
Yes.
Speak.
Very, very briefly. Look, I do agree with the sentiments of this motion. And look, I've spoken to Councillor Carbone about my feelings in terms of the depth of the motion, the breadth of the motion. I think to an extent we could be going further. We could be banning caged eggs. We could be banning foie gras being sold at these markets. I think the fact that we are limiting ourselves to fur is a bit of a lost opportunity if we do want to make a stance on animal cruelty and things that we can practically do to discourage animal cruelty. So look, I'll second it because I think it's something worthwhile, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Hubble. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Councillor Hughes?
I just have a question. Do we have any markets that this has been identified as an issue within the city of Burnside?
That needs to be directed to Councillor Carbone.
Okay, maybe he could address that in summing up. Also have a question, and perhaps this is something else Councillor Carbone could cover off on. The mayor's ceremonial robes, would she then be not able to wear them at any council events as well? Just maybe those points could be covered off.
My thoughts on that matter are that if this motion were to get up, it would not be appropriate in my mind. You can't move this motion and then have a different stance to be taken. In my mind, it would be required.
The word display is pretty clear.
I just have one other question around then how the CEO would interpret point 4. So I've heard this morning on radio station around the response was that this motion aims to prevent people from selling second-hand goods at garage sales and things like that that would potentially be held at Glenunga Hub. I just read that as we would promote people from disposing of goods or reselling in an ethical way, not necessarily prohibiting them from selling them second-hand.
Through Madam Mayor, if this motion were to get up, my understanding is that essentially we would be discouraging people from selling, whether it's in its initial state or a used state, on council land. Therefore, it would be the alternative to reselling. So another use, and not being the expert, I would provide limited information potentially on our website, perhaps glean from some of the approaches that have come through to council, but barring that, I wouldn't envisage any more promotion of that.
Councillor Cornish?
Following on from Councillor Hughes' questions, if it was moved and it was a motion, and we requested that, but someone actually does, how do we police it? How, what costs are involved? There's nothing for us to stop them. It's not a bylaw, so we can't fine anyone. It's actually not a law. It's almost just a proclamation that we wish people don't. But there's nothing in our arsenal to actually enforce it. Is that correct?
Through Madam Mayor, I think that is the weakness of this motion, that in my mind, to the enforcement, for one, I would not envisage it an appropriate spend of ratepayers' funds to send rangers out on the weekend to a market to interrogate storeholders as to whether they had fur was real or not real. I think our ability to enforce this is very limited. Therefore, we would just be relying principally upon a principal position and promoting that position, because one can promote it. But I think the enforcement angle is very limited. And if we were tested legally, I don't think we would succeed.
Councillor Davey and then Councillor Piggott.
I was going to move, I wish to move that the motion be put, please.
Seconder. Councillor Davis. Right, I should put the motion. Those in favour? Sorry. Put that to the vote first. Yes. Put the motion, that the motion be put is, do you support that, please? Raise your hand if you support that.
We have a
5. 5, that's not sufficient, so it's not carried. Lost. Now, Councillor Piggott was next to speak.
Thank you. I find this a disappointing motion, I have to say. It's an issue that's, as a rule, probably unarguable in a general sense, but I think bringing it to the chamber tonight is really poor form. Really poor form. And I do struggle with the motivation of Councillor Carbone. I feel if he genuinely did want to change policy here, he would have done the work with administration and he would have actually put this issue, and perhaps among others, Councillor Huber has raised a couple of others. When you look at issues like this, there's any amount of them, in actual fact, that could be equally as full of merit and to be put into play. But what is actually happening here, I think, is a grab for headlines or Facebook likes, and I feel that's really disappointing. Certainly at a time when local government is so under fire in the state. We have a state newspaper that is constantly looking for things to whack local government around. We have a government looking at rate capping and using the front page stories that are being put out around local government as an excuse that this sector is out of control and really needs some serious work. And so I think it's really unfortunate. It's something that it's not in our jurisdiction, in actual fact. We could have it in a policy, and it could have been done with all the work done, with the question asked of the Chief Executive, not in chamber, but out of chamber, and how it could actually have been done. Councillor Carbone could have done that if he genuinely wanted to change the policy in favour of the cause he favours. And I accept that he is sincere in the cause. I don't feel what he's doing tonight, though, assists it. And I don't feel that I can support it for that reason. I again, as a council we're here, potentially, I potentially in the paper tomorrow is not supporting the cause, but being pro-fur, and that's not fair either. So I really am frustrated that a motion like this would put into council. And for that reason, I feel that I cannot support it, and I feel it would be appropriate if we didn't support it. I think it opens the door to any amount of issues that are not front of mind for our ratepayers. I've not had this issue brought up by my residents, and I would question how many of us have. It is an issue, it's not an issue at the moment. We're not aware of it happening on council land. We don't exactly have a lot of markets on council land. It's a very minor issue that's even available to us. I don't think it's even happening. And here we are spending time being made. If you look at any of the social media around this, we are, actually we're not. Councillor Carbone is taking a certain amount of stick about whether it's relevant. I've got one in front of me here. It says empty bins, mowed parks, fixed footpaths, lower rates. And I think for that reason, we've got to be very careful the stuff that we do put on notice here. And for that reason, I'm not pro-fur. I encourage Councillor Carbone to push the cause. However, I don't see us passing this motion making any difference to it. And I do not want to encourage other issues that we can have very little effect on being brought as a headline grabber to future meetings. So for that reason, I will not be supporting it.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Just like to say to the residents and ratepayers that have been emailing us over the last few days that I've read your emails and I know your concerns. I also want to raise your awareness that the Customs Act is there and fur trade, etc., is managed by the federal government. And we heard today the State Minister also confirmed that. So I want to reassure the residents and ratepayers that the state and federal government are managing this terrible behaviour that unfortunately does occur in this world, and we as a council will be as efficient and effective as Councillor Piggott has outlined. Thank you.
So, did you have something there? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Dawes.
I'll talk to the microphone now in front of me this time. Look, I do recognise this is a social global issue. I've counted 18 different emails we have received over the last 3 or 4 days, of which at the moment I can only say 6 are definitely Burnside residents and 12 they haven't indicated. So I have asked Councillor Carbone just to check that for me. I do worry because, you know, I've gone to the internet and I've checked what these political parties and political groups have been saying, and one of them wanted to dismantle the RSPCA, which I hope that's not true. So obviously there's some issues between the various groups as well. But I do want to acknowledge that this is a social global issue, there's no question of that, but is it a local government issue? I listened to the debate today on ABC Radio. I am disappointed. I will say this openly that Councillor Carbone and Councillor Jones, Councillor Davis were involved in that discussion. But still, I was interested to hear what they had to say. I was interested in what the president of the LGA said and also what others had said. And obviously, there was a belief that this really isn't an issue for local government. It has come out of the blue. I would have liked to have some forewarning. I passed on to Councillor Carbone, and I would have liked to have had some input into the actual wording of the motion because I think it's a bit too wide. But the question to me is, where does our jurisdiction lie and where does it end? You know, and I'm probably a little bit along the lines of what Councillor Piggott said. But there are 3 tiers of government and we're all intertwined, and we do get a lot of passing of responsibilities from those higher up. So can we influence opinions here, or do we leave it to state and federal legislatures to take the rein on this? Councillor Carbone says, no, we need to also be involved. A council recently tried to implement a CAP bylaw. You might have seen the paper, and they were put back in their place by the state government. So I thought, well, dear me, you know, oh, this is a similar thing. I'm not sure about that. But what I do see, though, we have supported a number of causes which are socially responsible, which are morally responsible, which are ethically responsible. And I just started to write them down. Like, it's quite a very impressive list. The climate action, climate emergency, including tree canopy. We've banned the single use of plastics at any of our council events. We're very supportive of our koala rescue groups. We're very, very supportive of recycling education, Indigenous acknowledgement. That was last year. Use of recycled materials in asset management. We're very, very keen on that and what other councils are doing. But do we now do, this is my question, do we now, for instance, oppose the reduction of fishing zones in South Australia? If we were a coastal council, perhaps we could, but is that going too far? should we say no to nuclear waste dumps in South Australia? Should we discuss that? And I said, no, that's not our that's not part of our role. So to me, where does it stop? How far do we go? And do our residents wish us to pursue? And that was the last question to me. And that last question is the most important one. And unless I hear to the contrary, which I haven't, it will be the deciding one for me. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I too will speak. And I thank Councillor Piggott and Councillor Dawes for what they've said. And I entirely agree with what they've said. I too am not pro-fur. And I too am anti-animal cruelty. But what broke my heart, absolutely broke my heart in the last few months, was that a human being who lives in Kensington Park was left to sit in a cane chair and her flesh rotted while she was still alive. That breaks my heart. This is an important issue, but that is much more an important issue for me. And that, I venture to say, is much more an important issue for every resident in Burnside, for every parent of a disabled child, for every relative of a disabled loved one. That is an issue that I would like to look at how the council can actually involve themselves in. I don't know, it is a state government issue, but it breaks my heart and broke my heart that that happened in our city and none of us knew, because all of us would have wanted to help. If we're going to put our energies anywhere, let's put it with vulnerable people.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Davis.
There's a question about what is the role of council, and perhaps it should have been more clearly explained in our onboarding process, and I don't think it was. But our responsibilities as a council found in Section 7 of the Local Government Act. And so when you ask questions like, well, what about climate change? It is in there. Section 7D talks about natural and other hazards and the mitigating effects of such hazards. So a lot of the things we've passed in the going back, taken issue, because they are within our jurisdiction. They are centred within what council can control. What we import and export is a federal matter. It is a federal matter. You don't see the Prime Minister coming to Burnside, taking an interest in whose rubbish bins are getting collected. He won't be making a comment on their apartments or anything like that. The way that our democracy works is we each have our own sections. We look after our sections. We could spend an infinite amount of time talking about everybody else's problems. And that's probably a great way to get on the news and get more TikTok followers. But it's not actually going to make a difference. If the members here want to make a difference and improve the lives of animals, there is work for you to do. In a report that recently got published, the Kilty report about the bushfire investigation, there was 15 recommendations, and 6 of those recommendations relate to us. In those bushfires, rather than moving emotion about supporting koalas or fur or things like that, go and have a look at the Kilty report. Go and read the 180 pages and go and pick out what local government's role is to play in there. I can guarantee you that you will do far more for animals if you go and read that report and look at how we can implement those recommendations in Burnside so that we are prepared for bushfires than you ever will getting more TikTok followers by running this in the media and trying to virtue signal. There is serious work for councils to do, and this doesn't come within Section 7 of the Local Government Act. This is completely outside of our jurisdiction, and quite frankly, I think it's incredibly embarrassing. And this is an excellent example for the local minister, the local government minister to use as to why we should have our rates capped. Because how many resources have been spent on this motion today? How much time has our CEO, our general staff, how much time have they spent being prepared for this meeting to answer these questions, when what they should have been doing is looking at the Kilty report. They should have been working on their reports in council. They should have been focusing their issues which are in Section 7 of the Local Government Act. So when I say we don't have any jurisdiction, our heads of power are contained there and they're set out very clearly. And that was the first thing I went to. And it's not here. Import, export of different products from overseas is not here. It's very, very easy to cause an emotional response in somebody. That's very easy to do. It's not hard. It's very difficult to actually solve a problem and make a difference. It's very difficult to go and read a 180-page report and look at how council policies and procedures are boring, and they're really boring, and actually go through and find out, are we bushfire ready? How do we negotiate with other agencies? Are we ready to perform that? And that's what we should be spending time on. These motions suck the air out of this council. They suck the enthusiasm out of it. We had a 520-page reports today. I can quite tell you that, you know, in my view, this council is a very low position. And because we've spent 4 days fielding questions from our residents on something which is completely irrelevant, that's what that does to it. It squashes creativity, it squashes inspiration for what we should actually be doing. And virtue signaling for no benefit is detrimental. It's detrimental to our staff, it's detrimental to our residents' confidence in us, and it's detrimental to our output. So do I support FIR or not? Doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter. It's not my job. Talk to James Stevens, he's our local member. That's his job. Let's focus on our job, because we have so much work to do. And have we really done it tonight about air and water? We really spent the time on the issues tonight. Have we debated that in full? We have not. And that's why people criticise council. That's why we shouldn't vote for this motion.
I think there are still a couple of people who have not spoken. Unless they indicate now that they do wish to speak, I am prepared to go back to Councillor Carbone. You wish to speak then, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, why
Because
not?
you've only asked questions.
I've only asked questions, we're all here. Look, I don't have much to say that's already been said by Councillor Piggott. I think Councillor Henschke and Councillor Dawes, I think, have covered off on all of the points tonight. And if you actually go to the RSPCA website, and it states there, if you are concerned about a particular aspect of animal welfare law operating within your state, you should contact the following people: your local state member, the minister responsible for animal welfare, and the government department responsible for animal welfare legislation in your state. And I don't disagree that what happens to these animals in other parts of the world is horrific. I do not disagree, but do we have the opportunity to make the biggest impact? And I know Councillor Carbone is going to tell us all that it's an excuse, but the issue that I have in my mind is, where do we draw a line? And this is what I've been thinking about all weekend. I think it goes back to what Councillor Dawes has said. You know, because we've got fur, and then, well, hang on, what about caged eggs? And then, hang on, what about any kind of meat product? And then it's just this slippery slope of things that we don't need to make a political stance on, because there are other members of government, not at local government, at state and federal government, that are meant to be addressing these issues. So I actually wouldn't have any issue if this motion doesn't pass, an alternate motion being put, that, you know, write a letter. But all of these people that have sent us emails today should put their energy to the actual people that can make the biggest difference. And I know with her that Sydney had passed this motion, and I would suspect that's probably because there's a significant number of huge markets in Sydney that probably sell these goods. That's the difference. So just to say that another council has done that and we should do it is probably not the right argument, because we need to think about the individual circumstances of our council. And look, I don't disagree that it's an issue. I think it's similar to what Councillor Piggott's going to say. We're going to hit the paper tomorrow because, oh, we didn't support prohibiting fur in the city of Burnside, and that's actually not what it's all about. So similarly, I'm also disappointed for that very reason.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will be quick. I won't copy everyone else. I suppose the big things that I would like to raise is, I don't actually know what our community thinks on this issue. We've got a few emails, it's come out of the blue, we've got no other feedback, it hasn't been an issue that's been bubbling away for quite some time, it's just completely come out of the blue. So I actually really have no idea what our entire community are in favour or against this motion as it stands. I am a little disappointed in the wording of the motion. The mover suggests that all levels of government need to work together, yet this motion has nothing in it about us lobbying federal government, has nothing in it about us lobbying state government and asking them to be a bit more proactive in this. It's just all on the state government. And that there are so many issues in terms of enforcement and the follow-up. I asked the questions about enforcement, and we have no ability to enforce But there are other aspects too. You know, we've just allowed busking to occur. And the number of musical instruments that might actually have fur attached to them and therefore be displayed, you know, is actually going to stop our buskers from going out on the streets. And I have to admit, driving during the COVID pandemic, it was quite fun to see a few, you know, buskers actually on the corner down near Dulwich. It was quite a nice experience to actually have a coffee and listen to some live music across the road. So there are aspects of this that I just don't think it should be rushed through. It should be something that is worked through a little bit better. So I won't be supporting it for all of those motions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I think there's only a couple. If not, then I will go back to Councillor Carbo.
Thank you, Worship. I'm disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I'm still disappointed in the comments that were said. We have received significant backing from a lot of organisations regarding this motion. We've had the RSPCA come out and support this. We've had the largest animal welfare organisation in the world come out and support this. You know, and I'll just address, if I can, some of the comments that were made. People asked about, well, is it an issue? Do we have fur at markets and so forth? And as I've mentioned in this chamber on a number of occasions, I'm proactive. I'm not going to wait for it to be an issue and then try and do something about it. I'll be on the front foot. In terms of the Mill Road, nothing to do with it. And I said that in my speech. It's got nothing to do with it. We're talking about the sale. Unless the mayor wants to sell her road, it's not an issue. We talked about the ethical reuse. That, I didn't have a chance to speak to it before, but that was about, there are organisations out there that take vintage fur coats and turn them into pouches to help them with victims of bushfires and so forth. Someone said it's not really a law, can't enforce it and so forth. It's also about making a stand. Just whether it's legal or not, whether you can enforce it or not, sometimes making a stand, having a position on something is just as important, if not more important, than what you can please and what you can't please. This is not about, and this pissed me off to be honest, this is not about Facebook likes. This is not about Facebook.
Leather shoe.
This is not about.
Councillor Davey, don't interrupt.
This is not about Facebook likes and headlines and so forth. I've been lobbying for this kind of stuff since I was a kid. So I find that very disappointing. I'm doing it just now for a couple of likes on Facebook. That was a cheap attack. Okay?
But it's true.
And that you're not supporting it because of the method, because of the way I went about it. Whatever. As far as there was a comment about customs can manage this and so forth. Yeah, customs can manage it, and they do manage it, but it's not illegal to bring them in. So as long as it's legal, they're going to keep coming in. So that was about us having a stand and making a position as to stopping the sale. Otherwise, they'll keep coming in. There's nothing illegal about fur coats. And of course, there was that whole not a local government issue, you know. And we talked about, Councillor Dawes mentioned about Indigenous acknowledgement and climate change and recycling and so forth, national, international issues. Yeah, we still have a say because we can actually do something about it. When it comes to fishery and fishery issues and so forth, there's nothing to do with Burnside, so I wouldn't mention that. But this we can actually do something about because we do have markets. One mentioned about, oh, well, you know, we should be focusing on the elderly and the lady who died in Kingston Park and so forth. Look, we can't rank social issues. You know, there's no order or priority. They're all important. So we can't say we can't do this because of that. This is just as important as anything else. Councillor Davis mentioned that he's been busy for the last couple of days fielding questions from residents. They're concerns from residents. So how does this diminish the issue that we have at play?
Concerned about wasted time.
Councillor Davis, don't interrupt it.
Okay. So, and there was a comment about we don't know how the community feels and so forth. There's surveys out there. Okay, all you can do is do a straw poll on people wearing fur coats, and you should know how people feel, because it's been an issue for 20, 30 years. I can remember images of people throwing red paint on people, you know, on Hollywood Boulevard because they're wearing fur coats. So I'm a little bit disappointed about the way this has gone. We are all entitled to bring ideas to this chamber that we are passionate about, and simply making a mockery of something or downgrading it, saying, oh, we've got better things to be worried about. Just remember, I might say the same thing when you bring a motion to this chamber, if you ever do.
Councillor Carbone, I think that's unnecessary comment to make. I think people have been very fair and in their debate this evening in relation to this matter.
I'll withdraw that last one.
Okay. I will put the motion. Councillor Davey, I ask you again, you refrain from making.
I'm just going to give some advice to you.
No. If you wish to give them advice, do it after the meeting or during the break, not during the meeting. Right, those in favour? Those against? Lost. Now we move to the waste management. 10.2.
Division.
You wish to make call a division? Councillor Hughes has called a division. Those who are in favour, please stand. Councillor Carbone and Councillor Hubel. 4. And those against, Councillor Lemon, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Jones, Councillor Hedgeby, keeping up, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Davey, Councillor Piggott, and Councillor Davis. And the motion is lost. Right, now we move to
encouraged to run for Parliament.
Excuse me, Councillor Davey, I've asked you already 3 times not to interrupt and not to make those kind of personal comments across the table. Please refrain from doing that in future. You're going to leave your conflict? Okay. Mr. Camp or Mr. Cooper, do you wish to come and sit here during this period of time? One of you, perhaps? I'll let you flip a coin or have a boxing match to decide. Preferably not a boxing match.
Fight for it, Barry.
I need to disrespect her.
Tie on.
All right, Councillor Carbone.
Okay.
We may not need it necessarily, but I just feel the receipt needs to be kept warm.
Yeah, Barry, do money.
That's more like it.
And I was being flippant, please don't take it. All right, so Councillor Carbone.
Yeah.
Returning to a serious matter.
Thank you, Your Worship. As serious as this is, I will acknowledge this is a lighter issue than the one we just discussed. But so, councillors, Australians pride ourselves on being a fair country where everybody is treated fairly and equally. But there is something uniquely unfair in the city of Burnside. At the moment, if you live in a multi-storey residential apartment building, I believe you are treated unfairly. Each homeowner in Burnside pays rates. Whether it's a $500,000 apartment or a $500,000 house, you pay the same rates. In exchange for these rates, our customers receive various goods and services. These goods and services include use of parks and gardens, a clean street, a footpath, urgent maintenance, use of the library, and so forth. Everybody receives the same or entitled to the same. But when it comes to rubbish collection, a key core component that each ratepayer is duly entitled to, unfortunately, we have the haves and the have-nots. And I find this a very unfair situation. This is, I believe, this is the unfairest position that Burnside can take. People living in apartment buildings have paid their normal rates like everybody else, plus rubbish removal costs on top of that. And why is this? Because people living in apartment buildings cannot adopt our 3-bin system because for them it's not possible, practical. If they could, they would, but they can't. And for this, they are penalised. How unfair is this? The 3-bin system works for our traditional living arrangements, but it does not work for our apartment buildings, a growing sector in Burnside. There are the Queen Vic apartments, there are of course the Air apartments, and there are the larger buildings in Cedar Woods. And it will become more and more popular. I listened to the debate in the chamber on this matter last time, and to be honest, I was very disappointed about what I heard, just reflecting on it. When it comes to people living in apartment buildings, it's not about how rich they are. It's not about whether their letterboxes are accessible or not, and it's certainly not about green waste. It's about fairness, treating our residents fairly. Please support this motion, and let's see what we can do for our perhaps forgotten ratepayers. Thank you, Richard.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Piggott, do you wish to speak now or?
Yes, please. Yep. Yeah, look, I am happy to second this. As before I start, I live in Farm Building. I don't feel it's coming. Because it's not the city of Burnside.
A little louder, Councillor Piggott.
Sorry, yes.
And,
So just to get that out in the open. So actually, I do know a bit about this issue. I think the expression is good with the lily. I think Councillor Carbone might deal with the lily a little bit in regard to apartment owners. But the fact is that there is an issue in apartment buildings about waste disposal, and it is one of the core services that councils do offer our residents, and it is something we exclude apartment buildings from as a currently stands. We take rates from them in the same manner as we take from all other residents, we do deny them the council service of collecting the rubbish. And so from that point of view, I think it is a valid question to be asked. It is an increasing area of the way people live in the city of Burnside generally. And I think it probably is in the same way as we feel as a council, it's important to be in the waste business and to actually work with our residents to collect their waste, to perhaps help them reduce their waste or at least stream their waste. I think there is a part of our city that we're not working with to do that, and that is the apartment style living, which is on the increase. So I think it is worthy of a report. I don't know how much it would cost necessarily. I don't know what the answer is. The motion goes into quite a bit of detail, the sort of things to look at. I don't think it's a major amount of work. I think it would be a reasonable thing on behalf of, even if we look at this as a report and decide it's probably best to leave it as it is, I think it is a worthwhile. In stark contrast to the previous motion, it is a worthwhile use of council resource to actually look at this issue and see if there is an answer that we might be able to provide to these residents with the same things we provide to every other for their rents. So I do support the motion to ask for a report.
Can I just ask Mr. Cooper to make a comment in relation to something that you raised in terms of the amount of effort or amount of work?
Oh, okay.
I might as well get him to respond.
Yeah, no.
Okay?
Yeah, excellently. Through the Mayor, in terms of producing a report, the administration will be very happy to undertake this. We've got a lot of information already, but we support the motion that's on the table to actually provide all elected members that information to be able to make a decision. So yes, we support that.
Thank you for your contribution, Mr. Cooper. You can stay in that seat.
Willingness to do a report, and in light of the fairness, could we actually expand this to industries and commercial properties as well that also pay rates and get their rubbish picked up by private contractors as well?
Yes, we could. And we can
look at it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Will that
Are you
require
happy to take that on board?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Turnbull was next, and then I think it was Councillor Davis, Hedgie, David.
Thanks, Mayor. And last year, when Councillor Carbone raised this issue of the City of Burnside collecting rubbish from the air apartments, it was noted that the residents were not recycling, as do the mainstream residents of Burnside. My question is, has the corporate body of this place provided educational opportunity for segregating the waste in line with the policies of the Council of Burnside? That would make it a lot easier to pick up the rubbish if they had. If not, can they be provided with information and some education for the residents to do this? All you need is your recycling stuff like your paper and your milk bottles and all that sort of stuff, wine bottles. And like you just need 2 bins, you don't need a green bin, but they do need to be educated. Do you know if they've done this?
They don't do green ones.
They don't use greens, no.
They do.
Councillor Carbone, it might be better for you to actually make that comment when you speak rather than responding to Councillor Turnbull now. We'd be happy to hear that response and be able to provide that information. I just asked Mr. Cooper if he could enlighten us on that one as well. Councillor, and our next person is Councillor Davis. And then Hedgie, then Davey, and then I'll add Hughes.
Yeah, I had a question. Businesses are charged rates on the same basis as houses. Do we provide rubbish collection for businesses?
Through the Mayor, for most we do, that's correct. But if you take the example of Burnside Village, they make arrangements to dispose of their own rubbish. So the council does not provide that.
Will the consideration of disposing of the village's rubbish be included in this as well?
Yes, in accordance with what Councillor Hughes was asking, yes, we would do. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cornish, yes, we would do that. Yeah.
Would we need to change the motion?
Yeah.
Have you finished, Councillor Davis?
No, I have more questions.
Okay, carry
on. Is it true that East Waste could collect rubbish from air apartments and then change their bin?
Through the Mayor, I would have to check that, Councillor Davis. That would obviously be reported in the report to the council.
And would we also be requiring them to change how they separate their organic waste from their wet waste? Because that would be increased costs better than try.
Yeah, through the Mayor, the same answer applies.
All right, Councillor Hedgie.
Thank you. My question is, will the report include a benchmarking exercise with other councils that would have lots of apartments, for example, like the City of Hobart, Steve, having a petition to their person?
Yes, through the Mayor, thanks for your question. I'm not sure a full benchmarking exercise would be appropriate, but we could certainly do some comparisons. Those council areas that have large apartment.
Councillor Davey was next.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I have some questions about, because I think a couple of different types of residents have already been raised. We've got high-rise, we've also got retirement villages, where there's huge challenges in terms of waste recycling and sorting and disposal. Other apartments. What other sort of businesses do we collect rubbish from, such as Woolworths on Tasmania Avenue, big supermarkets? Do we collect their waste? Or
through the Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice to Councillor Davies, but again, we'll come back and report that information.
I'm just worried about the equity issue. And also, do we need to go down the path of measuring household waste now? I mean, some households put out incredible amounts of waste, and some of it's sorted and some of it's not. Some of us hardly put out any waste at all. So are we going to evaluate that sort of, if we're talking about equity and fairness?
Through the Mayor, there are obviously limitations in terms of what we can do with our rating process. As you know, all of our residents, businesses or house owners pay a rate which is based on the dollar valuation of their properties. It's a consistent rate for everybody. and that rate covers everything. So the cost of our libraries, the cost of rubbish disposal. So you could argue that in terms of fairness, that not all residents use the library, but there are costs in their rates for the provision of that library. And rubbish is no different to that. I think the interesting thing about this particular scenario is the fact that when those apartment buildings are developed, the waste disposal mechanism for those apartments are obviously part of the development approval. And in some instances, it's cheaper for them to provide their own rubbish collection processes. So it's not as straightforward as that, and fairness cannot be applied that way. The rating process basically comes down to how do we fairly distribute the costs of all the services that council provide to our residents. So
this one's about avoiding double dipping where there
would be, but
twice, potentially.
Yes.
Right, Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I had a question, which I think you probably just covered off because Councillor Carbone mentioned that the reason that these bins weren't collected is because it didn't comply with the 3-bin system. You're saying it's actually because of the development application.
Through the Mayor, the original development application certainly would have looked at how the rubbish disposal was going to take place, and that would have included the size of the trucks, the bins, the actual separation of the rubbish. So all of those factors would be taken into account. What we could say is if the Air Apartments wanted to have the 3-bin system out the front on the main road there, we could do that, but I'm not sure whether that would be acceptable to the community. So we have to look at that as well.
Councillor Jones was next. You got a question?
My question was, don't we need to change the motion if we want to put commercial bin collection in? Because otherwise the administration will read the motion that's passed and write a report accordingly.
Through the Mayor, I'm happy to pick that up as part of the report.
Yeah.
I think it's fairly clear what
I took it for granted that Mr. Cooper's acceptance of that did not require it.
Okay, seems a bit strange.
They'll take it on board as part of the general discussion about these kind of rates that he requires. Okay, Councillor Davis, yes, minutes.
I'll speak to the motion. I actually quite like the motion on presuming administration wrote it. What this is actually doing, or did they? Who wrote this motion?
I think that's not an appropriate question to ask. The motion was put by Councillor Carbone, and many people get help to write motions. We actually provide an encouragement to elected members to help with the writing of motions. So I think it's a totally inappropriate comment to make.
The aims of the motion are very different to what the speech that Councillor Carbone gave. Councillor Carbone talked about inequality in multi-storey apartments, and this motion is completely different from that, and it's about looking at ways that East Waste can work with apartment buildings to facilitate that collection. So I'm happy with the motion, but I'm not happy with the speech that Councillor Carbone gave. For the following reasons. Being that when you pay rates, there is no individual carve out for the amount of rubbish you pay. What you pay is for a complete package of services delivered by council. Now, some of us use the library more, some of us use our parks more, some of us have more waste, some of us have less waste. And as a whole, that's what we pay for, is that complete package. So what this motion does is asking for the administration to conduct a report and investigate how we could possibly work with high-rises more to pick up their waste so that they could come under that system. Not as it was last time, essentially, if I recall correctly, to reduce the amount of rates that they pay. Because in my view, the rates you pay don't get broken down item by item. Like I haven't been to a library for quite some time. So do I get a carve out now because I don't use a library? Or I haven't been to Hazelwood Park in a while. So does that mean I don't have a carve out for the maintenance of Hazelwood Park? So the way that Councillor Carbone put it, I disagree with. But the motion that's actually in here, which I think is valid, which is good, is about exploring how we can make use of that. So I support the motion that he's put, but not the speech that he's given. And I want to make it clear that I'm very opposed to reducing certain residents' charges or increasing them, for example, based on their consumption of one service or another. Because as we're trying to encourage our residents now, we want to encourage them to use their red bins less. So if somebody doesn't put out their red bin for a couple of weeks, are they then going to go and apply for a rebate? And maybe something we should look at as an idea is, I know we have barcoding systems now that we can, now who's being snide? As we have barcoding systems, and whenever somebody puts their red bin out, there's a barcode system and it'll actually weigh it. So we actually know which households are contributing more and how often they're getting collected. So if you wanted to look at rewarding system, then you should look at it holistically from Burnside or the whole region on a pay-per-use model, if that's what you wanted to do. So if that's the way you're going to do it, then do it that way. I agree with the motion, but not what Councillor Carbone wants.
Next was Councillor Hedgkey, followed by Councillor Buell and Councillor Levin.
I've got a question and then I'll speak quickly. My question is, can we improve the amenity of our wards from the horrors of the conga lines of bins that happen, for example, in our wards when we have high density, low rise development, multiple units putting out 20 or 30 red bins followed by yellow bins. I mean, rather attractive to see kind of, but I suspect it creates great havoc in the streets and not great for the amenity. Can we, will this report perhaps identify these problem areas and help these communities provide a more efficient solution instead of dragging out 30 bins each week? And yeah, that's a question, please.
Through the Mayor, thank you for your question. I don't think the report will address that issue. I think it will be quite possible to do that. What we are able to do and reinforce that there are issues is to make sure that people put their bins out and bring them back in at the appropriate time so they're not left out there for excessive periods of time. But in terms of changing the process itself, no.
Now you would wanted to speak, Councillor Hedgkey.
Well, I do think we do need to, if we're looking at a report and trying to improve our services, that maybe there's scope to provide a better service in that respect and offer these type of communities a contractor that would come and empty a large bin, perhaps work with these communities to implement a new system. I think, as you said, these developments were approved years ago. Perhaps it wasn't something really thought through. Things have changed, and there are more efficient and effective ways of collecting rubbish these days and people individually putting out their bins, you know, such complexes. So I do think perhaps this might be something for the future to improve the waste services.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I think you know, part 3 of this motion is the best part of it. That's the organic and recycling options. Look, we know through our discussions over time, many motions, that contamination of recyclables is a big issue. We know that organic materials in landfill is a very big problem, and I think anything we're doing to allow the provision of, I guess, green and recycling to occur where it, in a de facto sense, doesn't currently occur is a wonderful thing. And look, I just wonder whether this potentially gives us an opportunity to explore soft plastic collection. If we're looking at single buildings or single complexes, even, providing that additional service for people living in those forms of housing, that could serve to be a bit of a trial for us and a chance for us to say, well, here's an innovation we can make citywide. Let's try it in these small controlled environments. So this is, I'm really looking forward to seeing what we get back from this.
Thank goodness we don't have any of those 9-storey monstrosities that they have in Melbourne. Councillor Levin.
Right, thanks.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Cornish. Yeah, we did twice. Sorry about that. It's Councillor Cornish. I hadn't crossed your name. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I will support the motion that's written to get a report back. Certainly, I thank the you know, the administration from taking on some of those other equity issues that need to sort of be explored. And in terms of Councillor Henschke's questions, I live in one of those low-rise units, and this might be contrary to Councillor Davis, but to limit the number of bins, because we've got 5 units and I didn't want 15 bins on our property, we share, because we don't actually create that much waste combined. So a lot of those bins are air. So we actually share the bins, and we take turns and take them out and bring them back in. Because it's a Tuesday night, I'm not taking it out right now, as my neighbours are. You know, that's something that you can do, and obviously makes it difficult if we're charging by weight, because you have to spread it over a couple of ratepayers. But certainly, it's you know, it's an education tool that you could do. But if we are becoming more and more, I suppose, high rise and high density, Barcelona is the classic example where they take up 3 car parks on the street. One has a dumpster in it that is, it smells great. It's got a double locking system, an airlock system, and you just walk your stuff down from your apartment and you put it in the recycling bin, the green organics bin, or the red waste bin, and every day a big truck comes and picks them up. They've got one for every block, 3 car parks, and it's a really good and unique system over there. And you know, when you get in this game of local government, you look at the weirdest things when you go travelling around the world, like waste, and how they manage their waste in their cities. And I looked at how Barcelona did it, and I just thought, this is so efficient, so efficient. I don't think we've obviously got the high rise and the density that Barcelona has in the city of Burnside, but certainly I think probably in 100 years' time, we'll probably get there. If we lose our heritage, which I think we probably will in 100 times, although we'll fight tooth and nail to keep it. You know, certainly some of those aspects might be looked at by East West going forward. So I will support the motion for this report.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I'll speak very briefly. I am
got me on the list.
Sorry?
Have you got me on the list?
No, I didn't have you on the list. Sorry, Councillor Davey. I didn't see your hand up before Councillor.
It's been up several times. That's all right.
Apologies, I didn't see it.
I'm not against getting a report. I am potentially against us paying additional funds, because I think that's part of the development application that's put forward, and I think for the council to take that back on. I don't have an issue with us seeing whether we can facilitate something through East Waste that might assist in the overall scheme of how we can assist residents becoming more environmentally sustainable. So I'm happy to get a report back, but would be extremely reluctant for the City of Burnside to take on any additional costs. I think the real issue that's come up is around this equity of people that pay rates, and we collect bins from people who have exemptions from rates. So they're paying nothing and getting their waste collected. So I think you can't see it as, you know, it's already been debated tonight, but you can't see it as I pay this rate, I get the same as everyone else, because we all use the facilities differently. And as I said, there are people that don't pay rates or exemption and we still collect their rubbish. So I'm happy to see the report. It would be extremely reluctant for us to take on any additional cost. That was the conditions of their development application.
Now, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I actually endorse all of the comments that Councillor Hughes has made. My question is this an opportunity, is this in terms of recycling and improving our waste diversion and all of that sort of thing, to look at perhaps collecting our red bins every second week and those sort of issues? Is this the sort of time that we sort of look at that sort of reduction of?
Through the Mayor, I don't think it's particularly specific to motion or notice. So at the moment, no, we can do that.
So would that be something we would look at separately under waste management practices?
Yes, very much so.
And
Yeah.
I believe in terms of the red bin collection, where state government has legislation that controls that.
The City of Belfast are doing a trial. And
Trial.
they've got an exemption.
Yeah, they've got an exemption.
Yeah. So we
And I think that would be actually being tested by the state government to see how effective or not. And then that would guide them in terms of direction for other councils, other metropolitan councils. So I think I understand that's what, why Holbus Bay, when they're there, that's why they're being part of the experiment. Councillor Dawes, what's next?
Was Councillor Lemon?
No,
No.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Jones.
The question first. We were sent today a document. I know it's 2001, and there's yellow highlights throughout it. And in there's a recycling. It's a question probably for Martin, and they're going to separate into paper, cardboard, plastics, cans, etc., and glass. I said, is that still the case, even though it's 19 years ago?
Through the mayor, I understand that was submitted as part of the development application.
Yes, it was.
And
did they go ahead with that?
As far as I'm aware, yes, it did. We would have to check that and come back.
Right. So I think some of the council talked about education and so forth, and it seems in 2001 they were on the money. I think Mr. Browson said it today. But, so that's one point. I do support what Councillor Hughes has just said. I have a neighbour who has a house on 2 blocks of land. He thinks he should get 2 green bins, but it's on 2 blocks of land. Everybody sees it differently, right? So I'm a little bit like what Councillor Davis was saying there as well. My concern is in number 2, where it says potential contributions, and it says 20,000. I've seen $20,000, and I think Councillor Hughes is going to say, well, I don't know, like we've got to pay $20,000 extra because we haven't got the trucks or capacity to be able to take this rubbish away. But it seems to me that back in 2001, when all this happened, that they did have an education process in place. Now, we talked about fairness at the start, and I don't think it's about fairness so much. But when you purchased an apartment in Air Apartments, you knew that in your corporate fees, there was going to be a charge extra for waste. So what I'm pleased about is, let's explore the opportunity. I think that's a good thing. And let's see how we can assist further. But if the report comes back and says we must pay an extra $20,000 per high-rise, I'm going to say no way, because we're going to find my neighbour who's got 2 blocks of land, well, I want an extra green bin and so forth. And
I think, Councillor Dawes, that's the purpose of having the report, rather than getting into the
I
detail of that debate now.
Understand. So I'm just forewarning, I will put my hand up for it, but I don't like that potential contributions in number 2.
Councillor Jones.
People who don't live in Burnside use our swimming pool, and they pay the same as us. It's an outrage.
Let's build a wall.
Will the report consider these other issues of equality?
Exactly.
Through the mayor, no.
How much would it cost to build a wall?
How many people who's sitting up and taking a life? All right, so don't see anyone else who's got a hand up to speak. So I will go back to Councillor Carbone.
Well, thank you, Worship. That debate was much more pleasant than the previous one, so I'll sleep a bit better tonight.
I think they were equally tempting.
Yeah, a better bunch. So. Just a couple of comments, if I can, just from what I've heard tonight. For starters, I just wanted to state for the record that I never did advocate for a discount of rates the last time. In fact, I've got the motion right here. He doesn't mention that, he mentions the report. So I just wanted to put that clear on the record that I never advocated for a discount of rates for those that live in apartment buildings. And I do think it is an issue of fairness, because we have residents who pay rates and don't get their rubbish collected. So I think that's an issue of fairness. But in just going over some of the comments, it is going to be an emerging issue. Moving into the future, we are going to see more and more of these happening. I mean, who would have thought the Cedar Woods estate would be, 6 stories high a couple of years ago? So we are going to see more and more of those sorts of things. I remember when the Queen Victoria apartments were renovated, because my mum used to work there, and so that sprung up out of nowhere. And of course, Air Apartments, the Odetza building. So it's sort of funny how out of nowhere, we've got now, our city is changing, and we now have a lot more apartment buildings. As far as green waste and education, my comment to that is we are much more effective when we're all sitting at the same table. So if we are going to enter an agreement where we pick up the rubbish with Air Apartments and so forth, and Queen Vic Apartments and so forth, we have a lot more pull in demanding certain things. And I think green waste is going to be one of those things. So you always have more power when you're at the table rather than not at the table. In terms of businesses and retirement villages, well, my argument is simple. If you pay rates, you get your rubbish collected. It's as simple as that. So why would we be any different from anyone else? The 3-bin system at apartment buildings and why they don't do it, it's just a matter of practicality. You can't have someone on the top floor putting 3 wheelie bins into a lift and going down and so forth. It just wouldn't work. So that's why they don't do it. Now, the argument around, well, it was part of their DA, you know, that's kind of what they signed up to and so forth. And when we say they, we're talking about the developer who's long gone. So they are the people who have invested in the building. And by the way, they're probably like the 2nd or 3rd owner now. So we're penalising people, okay, who had nothing to do with the DA 20 years ago, okay? So what, forever and a day, the next 100 years, they're going to have to sort of wear, you know, an agreement they had in place or the developer had in place, you know, back when it was built and so forth. So I think moving forward, we have to sort of forego what was said in the past, stop talking, and
I think it's appropriate for nobody to make any comment. Let the summary happen, then we can move on.
So that's it. I've said my piece. It's an important issue. It is about fairness and being equitable. People who pay rates should be entitled to the same level of service as everybody else.
Thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Division? Carried. Division's been called. Please stand those who supported the motion. Just got a division, Mr. Camp, so just a couple of minutes. Okay? Councillor Carbone, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Henschke, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Piggott. Those against, Councillor Lemon, Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Jones, Councillor Davey and Councillor Davis. Now you can come back in. Now I'm going to ask the members if at this point in time you would like to have a 10-minute break, or do you wish to plough through? I can see Councillor Pickett going plough through. I'm happy if that's what you want, and then we can finish and go. You like a break? Well, we need to have a bit of a vote. You can just go. Just go. Because I'm getting the feeling that they'd like to plough on. Councillor Henschke. Okay. The first, we've got now the subsidiaries, which are just moving on. So Councillor Cornish, you're going to move East Waste Management Authority, seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? Carried. And you've got Councillor Henschke. Eastern Health Authority, Councillor Lemon. Moved. Councillor Piggott seconded. All those in favour? Carried. Highbury Landfill. Councillor Piggott. Seconded. Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Carried. Air and Water. Councillor Piggott. Councillor Lemon. All those in favour?
Can I ask a question about the Air and Water?
It's not really done on these, is there?
Other business?
Can I suggest, leave it to other business, or you can consider asking questions on notice of the next meeting. And then everyone has a public result, everyone gets the results. I'm not telling you what to do, but just consider either of those, particularly if it requires any sort of detail, because the detail might not be available immediately. Okay. So air and water, I've got to go back to. We had a, you had a, did we vote?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Nothing from Eastern Region Alliance. Brownwood Keswick Creek Stormwater Board. Councillor Piggott, Councillor Lemon. I just point out too that the mayors of those 6 councils actually put a submission into the state government to seek funding for the entire project. Whether or not we'll be successful in that application, we do not yet know, but that has gone to the state government to seek in terms of trying to get projects that are already happening, getting more funding. That actually came as a result of the mayors of they're involved in Brownwood Creek to move that forward, and that's gone with state government about 3 weeks ago.
What about?
Mayor's report, can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor.
Can I pull it?
Sorry? Oh, you wish to pull it? Yeah, pull it. You can. You can
Just
pull it now.
a question, if I may.
Sure.
Because it sounds very exciting, so I'd love to get an update.
Which one?
The potential newspaper in the eastern suburbs.
Do you want to talk about that?
We've all got it.
Right, well, look, we had a meeting with the Adelaide Hills. There's actually not what's it called again, the Herald. It's called the Herald. Currently called the Adelaide Hills Herald. They are keen to provide the opportunity to actually turn that newspaper into the Eastern Herald. They are currently talking to the councils that are close to the Adelaide Hills, Mitcham, us. Anyway, they were talking to some other councils as well who are in close proximity. We had a really good meeting with them. They were going to come back to us with a proposal. We haven't received that yet, or no? Haven't received it yet, but with a proposal. But they were very happy to put in a column. You know, like we showed them the focus that used to go into the Messenger. They do also run, if you haven't seen one, you can go pick one up at the IGA at Leabrook. They have them there regularly.
It's free.
Free, yes, it's a free newspaper.
Oh, so it's already out there.
Yeah, it's already, the newspaper already exists. And what I found out was
in Burnside, already,
yes, it's
out
already, well, at least at the IGA at Leabrook, they have them.
If we clarify that a bit, the Adelaide Hills Herald exists.
Yes.
And they were proposing to create a second masthead for the Eastern Herald, so 2 would run. The Eastern Herald doesn't exist just yet.
Yeah.
But they're proposing to kick that off. And that would be sponsored by advertising, etc., all those businesses in this new catchment area.
But they do exist in terms of their current distribution as the Adelaide Hills Herald. And as I said, you can go and pick one up at the IGA at Leabrook. That's at least one place. There are some other places that they have within Burnside where they actually currently distribute only to one particular place. They don't do deliveries to everybody in the district. And they wouldn't do that either, but they would have certain collection points or distribution points throughout the city of Burnside. I guess Northern Cities might have been included in that as well. But certainly it's a great opportunity.
You think we'll get up?
Sorry?
You think we'll get up? What's your gut feel?
We're hoping so, because I think it's a great opportunity for our small businesses to advertise, and also for us to run events, notification, focus column that we used to have in the Messenger, and also opportunities for people, anyone who wants to be a bit of a journalist, who would like to actually write an article for the magazine, so or for the newspaper. Yes.
Who owns the newspaper? Do you know who's the owner?
I don't know the names, but it's an independent.
Yeah.
So it's not.
It's not nothing political.
No, it's a purely independent paper.
Yeah.
What was that? Oh, okay.
They produce it out of Crayford's.
Yeah.
And if I might add, the advertising costs are likely to be around up to 50%.
And there's a copy of it in all of your pigeonholes, Rob's as well, of the Herald. Yes.
How would it be distributed to residents?
Just locational. We actually talked to them about, gave them a great massive list of places that we perceived were very good potential collection, or they would deliver to one place. Like, for example, Pineview, Messenger used to deliver 100 or 80 copies to Pineview, and then people came and got them from the central collection box. They will do that for organisations like that, but they will also do it to possibly, on-the-run service stations. They already do the IGA at Legal. They would do perhaps the IGA at Dulwich. So various places, and so, but it's all done by agreement with them. We don't have anything to do with that. Purely to do with, they would make those arrangements with various places within Burnside.
Is that online as well?
Yeah, on the run, I mentioned that, don't worry. Because I actually mentioned that the Dulwich was owned by On the Run. And on the run, they already supply, I think, a lot of people, Woolworths and Coles in the area where they currently distribute, and have no problem with people. And the IGAs actually are very, very good.
So through Madam Mayor, yes, it is online. There's an online version.
Yes.
That's what.
Yeah, there is.
It's excellent. It operates just like the advertiser online, just like 3 book.
Yeah. Cool. Kathleen?
Yes, I have another question about your report.
Yep.
In every one except your first dot point, you tell us why you're meeting with people. And in your first dot point, you met with Campbelltown and mentioned mayors, but you haven't told us why.
Oh,
every other.
Okay. We generally, not for any particular purpose, but we generally.
It's a knitting club.
No, it's not a knitting club. But what we actually do is talk about some of the issues that relate specifically to their councils that also relate to their councils that also relate to ours. And so it's more than a knitting club. We seek advice from each other. We get support from each other. Our next networking, and the next time we're actually meeting, we're also including the president of Garrock and who's the mayor of Gawler. So it's a good opportunity for us to share issues and concerns that us as councils have. I think Michael Cox from West Torrens is very, very jealous he would like to join us. And we are not trying to keep it female only. It just happens to have started that way. Yes.
I'm interested in the newspaper distribution, and it sounds like it's going to be distributed to commercial locations. So will it also be distributed, say, to the Dulwich Community Centre?
Yes, yeah, we've included that in under hub and things like that, yeah. But it hasn't happened yet. No. They've got to come back to us with a proposal as yet. We only met with them Monday last week.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Are we good?
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Seconder, Councillor Cornish. Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Happy to answer any questions at any point about Mayor's report. Reports of members, delegates and reporting working parties. If anyone wishes to add anything to, please send it to Rob before we finalise the minutes. Council correspondence, memorials, 17.1, the letter from Minister Spears, one from Minister Knoll, and one from the Department of Education in relation to the Nunga High School basketball courts. Other business? Yes, Councillor.
Any other business?
Oh, sorry, I haven't received those correspondence. Thank you, Councillor Dawes. You got there at last. And seconded Councillor Bugle. Those in favour? Carries. Okay. Other business.
Other business.
Councillor Temple.
I refer to page 484 under Air and Water, Airbreak School water sales contract. There's several aspects of this that are very disquieting. The length of contract's not specified. The price, which is subject to a 10% discount, is not specified. The purchaser can apparently terminate the contract after 2 years. At this point, the City of Burnside will have recouped just 9K of the capital cost.
Yes.
Page 484 of this. It's very nebulous.
It's three Madam Mayor, but Councillor Hughes have answered, or should we, I'd prefer to take on notice.
I think John.
This is going to turn into debate. I need to do a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I was about to mention that.
And I expect that. It does turn into a debate.
Yeah, I think it's really, I don't think it's a debate that needs to be made now. I think it's a question that will need to probably be. Yeah, all right.
Do you want me to send through the questions?
It would be easier, Councillor Temple, if you sent it directly to Rob, and then it's clear that we have got it accurate. Now, I think that's almost it. Confidential items, we don't have any, and so I'm closing the meeting at 8:50. Yeah, well done.